Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if one person has their moon in Leo and the other has their moon in Scorpio. Typically, I'm talking about romantic relationships, but this can apply to any kind of relationship, including parent and child, or even two friends and that are, close enough where their emotional nature really does matter to you. And I'm going to say this for all of these videos. This is simply for the moon sign positions. Your sun signs and other inner planets can modify this quite a bit, as well as house placements. So definitely keep that in mind. And I'm just going by the pure influence of it. So when somebody has their moon in Leo, well, first of all, I want to tell you my theory about the moon influence, because we have the sun in Leo, we have the sun in Scorpio. How does that differ? I make it really simple. I basically look at the moon position as being a bit of the shadow self of an individual. And you can say to me, no, but it's your emotions. It's how you express your emotions. Well, to me, that is kind of the shadow self, because a lot of times our emotions are stemming from past trauma. And even when we have positive emotions, they're still coming from a very conditioned kind of place. They're all about reactivity many times. And if you listen to or read Eastern philosophy, they talk about kind of transcending those things, those kinds of reactions, even when they're positive, because what goes up must come down. And conversely, if a person feels down, they can go back up again. It's not like a permanent situation. So when people get caught up in their emotions, they're really just on a roller coaster sometimes. But we are in this physical reality. We are with this, whatever, if you want to call it, a conditioned mind. So we're here for a reason. We're here to deal with these things. So I'm not really a fan of transcending everything and just completely having no emotions, being robotic. And so let's talk about what can kind of lurk behind the moon in Leo individual. This is somebody who can be, on the positive end, can be very warm-hearted, can be very generous on all levels, including emotionally generous, can be very, financially generous. And I really feel like being emotionally generous is not something that we see every day. There's a lot of judgment out there, a lot of expectations that, oh, somebody doesn't act a certain way, let's cancel them. I'm talking about in individual relationships, like washing your hands of someone because they disappointed you, they didn't give you what you wanted. But a Leo person, maybe because Leo's a fixed sign, is known for loyalty. And I do believe that a balanced Leo person, and I'm talking about balanced with the moon versus being highly, if a person has a lot of hard angles from the moon, their moon is highly afflicted, then they may not be as balanced. So if they have hard angles to other planets, in other words. But under the right circumstances, even though I do consider the moon to be the shadow self, I feel like there can be some really positive things that come from a moon in Leo. Person can be very creative, but because it's in the moon position, they may not necessarily express their creativity the way that they should, and then that can, a person as creative as a Leo, and I'm using Leo for any prominent position in Leo who doesn't create, they're going to probably create drama. They're going to, they have to create, and they tend to be very artistic, but also very emotionally expressive. And this is where we can get into some issues, because the Leo person, who, especially one who is not well balanced, or maybe they have a sun in water or something that, or another fire, and they just are very, very, it's almost like being overwrought, where they tend to get very drawn into causes, and they become immersed in these issues, so they have something to champion. Those kinds of people can be very full of drama, because that's just part of that kind of natural actor or performer within themselves that wants to kind of express themselves. But it might be that they're expressing outrage over some situation that's going on, and it's not necessarily something that is positive or creative for themselves. And then as it comes to the issue of attention, the people always say that Leos are attention seeking. When the moon is in Leo, the person may feel like they have been ignored in their life, and perhaps they have. The moon can indicate the mother that the person was raised by and how they behaved. And if they had a mother who behaved like a Leo, their mother may have been a narcissist and been so self-absorbed that she ignored her child, and that child didn't feel seen. And so that's why people tend to be attention seeking, because they're just trying to be acknowledged in a way. But one of the unfortunate things that can happen is that when a person has suffered from narcissistic abuse, they can become narcissistic, and because they had to hyper focus on themselves since they were neglected, and they can become very self-absorbed, and then it makes a person clueless as to how they come across. And another thing with Leo moon signs that are imbalanced is that they can be very haughty, very full of themselves and looking down on people. So the very thing that I said before, when I said that the person can be generous of spirit, this could be the person who is snobbish. They just want to be with the A crowd, and anybody, they judge people based on how successful they think they are, and stuff like that, shallow things like that. And those kinds of people can be on a power trip. I mean, that's another aspect of it as well. So what happens when somebody who is a moon in Leo meets up with somebody who's a moon in Scorpio? So we're talking about fire versus water. Scorpio, both fire and water are emotional, but water is subjectively emotional. To me, Scorpio is the most difficult moon sign to have. That's my opinion based on what Scorpio represents and in the moon position. Because to me, it's going to automatically be more challenging being in the moon position. It's going to be the person's emotional nature, and the lower nature of Scorpio can be very vindictive. It's not uncommon, as far as I'm concerned, for people with the moon in Scorpio to harbor a lot of resentments towards people that they feel did them wrong. And it's important to note that the person may have every reason in the world to be upset about how they were treated by someone. It's not to suggest that they are imagining things or that they are exaggerating things. But the point is that the issue is it happening for a reason at a higher level? And, you know, what is being asked of you? If you have the moon in Scorpio, what is being asked of you? Sometimes people don't understand what the word forgiveness means. It doesn't mean that you're hanging with that person, that you're acting like everything they did was okay. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you're not going to become bitter in your life. You're not going to project onto other people the things that were done to you by the person that betrayed you or what have you. And so suffice it to say, somebody with the moon in Scorpio is probably more guarded than the person with the moon in Leo. They're more emotionally mistrustful. They may be more secretive emotionally instead of open, so that they don't kind of express their emotions in a very straightforward kind of a way. And that can create a lot of problems or conflict when these two individuals are dealing with each other. Now, on the surface, I mean, maybe one person has a sun in Sagittarius and the other one has a sun sign in Gemini, and they get along famously in every way except when they are all up in the feels, when they are really emotional. The way that they process emotions, the way that they express emotions couldn't be more different. And they clash because the signs of Leo and Scorpio square off to one another. And of course, you would have to look at each person's moon sign to see if it officially squares off, but I'm just looking at it from the signs that are involved, is that they do form a clash, and that can be very irritating, where each one has a hard time understanding the other's emotional nature. The Scorpio person may find the Leo person almost like insensitive to their needs, because really fire energy in the moon sign position or the sun sign or different, the Mercury, whatever, the inner planets, that type of person really wants to see the bright side, be proactive, and try to do something positive to remedy the situation. Scorpio is a fixed water sign. So Scorpio both of these are fixed signs. That's another important thing. And when you have a square, you have two signs squaring off to one another, and they're fixed signs, that can be like this immovable object. And it can be very hard to penetrate that because each person is so set in their ways emotionally, and they may be kind of digging in their heels. In order to understand another person, you have to be willing to put yourself in their shoes. And that takes flexibility. And, the fixed signs are pretty rigid. And that doesn't mean that they can't do it. Nobody is doomed to their astrological influences, but you have to be aware of how you have the tendency to be stubborn emotionally in order to change it. Scorpio is very perceptive. So a person with the moon in Scorpio can really kind of tune into other people's psychological motivations. But they still may have this sense of like, that should never have happened. That is unacceptable. And that's where they can get really stuck because one of the things about fixed energy is it can get into a rut. And when you have a fixed water sign, it means that I even like look at the emotions as opinions in a certain way. Your feelings being, your thoughts on things. I know Mercury is connected to that, but there's kind of almost like an interchangeable influence there. And I feel like people with the moon in Scorpio have a very difficult time once they feel a certain way about something of shifting it. And so this is where the idea of prejudice comes from. A lot of people think prejudice is synonymous with racism. That is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many different types of prejudices. You might have somebody who grew up in a racist household and they will only date outside of the race because they're still rebelling from that racist parent. That's not really progress, too much progress. That's still reactionary, and that's still not seeing that everybody is different. That just because, you had a parent of your race that was prejudiced, it doesn't mean that everyone from your race is prejudiced and bad. Or, of the opposite sex, if you're heterosexual, whatever. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I'm thinking of like, a heterosexual woman whose father is a racist. So she only dates outside of her race and ethnicity. And in a way, she might be sticking it to her father too. But she's also like thinking that all men from her race are bad. So she has to go outside of her race. That's not really open-mindedness, because she's still prejudiced against men of her own race, So that's what I'm trying to get at, is that it can be very hard for a person with the moon in Scorpio to be able to kind of shift their views, their feelings. And I could say the same thing about somebody with a moon in Leo. The saving grace is that the moon in Leo is that Leo is a masculine sign, which means that it is objective. It's not really into like personalizing everything, even though Leo is about personal self-expression or individual self-expression for sure. But there still is a universal quality with all the fire energy. And there's also that sense of, and when I say objectivity, that's being universal. And so a person who is a Leo, a moon in Leo, might still be able to transcend some of their own past negative experiences, even though they're a fixed sign, and they may be kind of fixated on things, and they're able to kind of see the bigger picture. So they may think that the person with the moon in Scorpio is being petty, is being vengeful. And they may think it's a negative, that they have negative energy, and that they're the positive one. Both of these signs can operate too much in their egos. And this, if both of these individuals have low self-esteem that is kind of masked maybe with worldly success or beauty or some other thing that can make, maybe coming from an upper class background where they have grown up with always having the best of everything, they could maybe kind of front and make it seem like they are confident or what have you, but behind closed doors, there may be kind of a power struggle between both of these people, and their ego is front and center, but it's operating at the lowest level. So what I'm getting at here is that this could be a very emotionally complicated relationship. I would never say in a million years that there are any combinations of sun and moon or whatever that are beyond redemption or, you know, that no, this will never work. I would never say that. But each person is going to step up to the plate, and they're going to have to bring their emotional A game to be able to accommodate the other person emotionally. All right, I hope that you enjoyed this. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.